Hopefully everyone got a chance to meet some new folks and chat in the breakout sessions. So again, we're excited today to have Ryan Jones, co-founder and CEO of Florence Healthcare. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be here, team. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what we'll do here is probably go to about 8:45 today, and then we'll have some broader needs and leads at the end. But we'll touch on some of Ryan's background, pre-Florence. We'll jump into the Florence Healthcare story and probably spend most of the time there. And then if we have some time at the end, a few of Ryan's thoughts on broader healthcare in the future. So with that, just to kick it off, Ryan, maybe you got an impressive background, BCG, Microsoft, Dartmouth, Cal. Maybe just give us a little bit of your background pre-Florence, and then we'll jump into how you got into Florence Healthcare.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to have a career early on that allowed me to learn a lot, have the freedom to learn a lot. I started my career as a technology analyst, writing white papers, really, as part of a research analyst firm. And the domain that I was focused on in telecom and electronics, there was a VC fund in Boston that was investing in those areas and picked me up as an analyst. And then as an analyst, when I was not knee deep in some spreadsheet, I noticed the trajectory that a lot of the entrepreneurs were on, and decided, within probably 3 days of starting that job, that I want to go do that, and set my course to figure out how to do that. So went to business school to get sort of the basic toolkit, and then went to work for Microsoft out of business school. And and my wife will tell you I'm a sexy, exciting guy, and that's evidenced by the fact that I built my career in document management ever since then. So I was the senior product manager ultimately on Microsoft SharePoint product, which manages billions of documents around the world and helps people organize information with web search. And that gave me a foundation of two things. One was a domain expertise that I thought I could put to use in a startup. And two is it taught me how the best managers of software as a service businesses in the world worked, how they thought about it, the basic toolkits that those managers used to make their technology businesses successful. So I'm super grateful for getting a chance to learn at Microsoft while I was there.
Cool. So it sounds like you saw early on that you said, hey, that entrepreneurship thing, that's a path I want to go on. And so how do I start positioning myself to learn and stuff? How did you think through when or what you would go start? So that's a question a lot of entrepreneurs have of, hey, I want to do it, but when's the right time, and how do I know, what I should go do?
Yeah, and I don't think it's something you can force. I think you have to be patient. And I was patient for I went to business. I decided in 2003. And then by the time I was done business school, and I was still working for Microsoft in 2007. So I had an intention for about 4 years of just, getting ready, seeing how much I could learn, and going to things like this, meeting people. And by the time I had been at Microsoft for a couple of years and felt like I knew how to sell enterprise software, I got a random introduction from a friend of a doctor who wrote a little application on his laptop to get medical journal articles faster. And that turned out to be my first startup called PubGet, which was in Boston. And we grew that business for about 4 years and sold it to Reed Elsevier, the big academic publisher, 4 years later. But it wasn't, it's not something you can force. You can get the toolkits ready, but then you sort of have to hang out and sort of create the luck to have someone that you meet to go build a business with.
So with that experience in the startup, foray into the medical journals, and is that what got you interested into healthcare? And did you want to build something in healthcare, or it just set you down that path and the right opportunity came up?
Yeah, I think I was pretty naive to the notion that you can build a business that also has an impact on humankind. I just wanted to go build a business, right? Had a pretty selfish outlook at the beginning, but my co-founder, the physician in that first business, spent a lot of time talking about, and we spent a lot of time thinking about how to articulate and expand the impact we were having on humankind. And this little application wasn't particularly sophisticated. It just combined a search engine for these medical journal articles with a transaction engine that allowed doctors to get it faster. But we were able to calculate the time saved for those doctors and the research teams. We calculated it was the same as a cancer research team working on cancer since Christ. And so, 2,000 years of the smartest people in the world contributing to something meaningful because you made software that helped them take their day back from scut work. That felt really good, and I think it changed my career. It was the idea of not only for me personally, but it also makes starting a startup better. So those that are working on their own startups, you can get all the SaaS metrics right. You can feel like you have the rule of 40 in your CAC and all those other metrics right, but you won't be nearly as successful as if you have something meaningful to work on that rallies people around the cause. That was a valuable lesson.
Very interesting. So, as you talk about your co-founder and ultimately getting into Florence Healthcare, what started to get you excited to say, hey, this is something that we want to go after?
So we sold that first business, and then when you find yourself unemployed and your wife's from Atlanta, you move to Atlanta. And so we were which has been another great change. We've been in Atlanta for a decade now, and it's been a wonderful place both to build a business and raise a family. And I wanted to do that same recipe again. How can we find something that's related to document management, which is what I know about, and in the healthcare space where we can make an impact on humanity? And so I started hanging around the Tech Village. I started hanging around ATDC. I started hanging around Emory, and that is a long process around which you have to be patient. So it took 2 years. For half of that time, I was still working for the acquiring company in my last business. The other half of that time, I was sort of consulting and not doing a lot, hoping to find the right founding team. And ultimately, I did at a ATDC hackathon, where I was a mentor in the healthcare space, and my two other co-founders were working on an idea. We feel lucky that we were brought together. The funny story about that is one of my co-founders was about to propose to his girlfriend and almost missed the hackathon because he was held up at the jewelry store buying the engagement ring. So there was a lot of luck that went around that day.
Oh, very cool. So as you met them, your co-founders, through ATDC and that stuff, one of the questions we always get from entrepreneurs is, hey, I need a co-founder. What do I look for? What were some of the things that either you were looking for and or you felt through those interactions that said these would be good people to start a business with?
I think it's pretty simple. I think it's two things. One is passion for the problem, because it's so hard, and everyone that's working on a startup on this call knows how hard it is. And so if only one person has passion and the other's sort of like a contractor, that sucks. It just isn't. The other is an interest in I guess it's a bravery around shipping, an interest in shipping. And so I was thinking maybe I'd do a different startup, and I called up Andres Garcia, who's our CTO and my co-founder, after that hackathon. I said, hey, I want to go work on this problem. Why don't you come with me and work on this problem? He said, no, Ryan, I'm going to work on the problem we did the hackathon about. I think it's meaningful. I think it has an impact on humankind. It's like, oh shit, okay. And he opened my eyes to the impact that the idea could have. And then two is that I was able to start selling, and he's able to start writing code in the first month. And that's really the secret. Startups until, kind of forever, but certainly through your Series A, if you're not either building product or selling product, your role is sort of not that important. Those are the two things that create something from nothing, and you have to have those things. You have to have one co-founder that's a selling person, one co-founder is a billing person, or you have to have that mix across the two of you. So I think it's pretty clear. This passion for the cause is one ingredient, and a bias towards shipping, whether it's sales or product, is the other ingredient.
I love that shipping, the sales and the product. So it's so important early on, to your point. So as you're, got the passion for the idea, you're finding a co-founder, a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, well, hey, how do I know that this idea there's something there? How did you start testing to say whether you're shipping the product or trying to sell some deals early on that started to get you to say, yeah, we think there's something to this idea?
There are a few times in your life where you're like, oh, I now know how to do this. And that was sort of a magic moment. It's like when you learn how to ride a bike or drive a car, and it was like, oh shit. And Merrick First, who ran the Flashpoint program, taught me something that helped me understand how to do it. And that was when you're doing customer discovery calls, you'll start to get a few that'll take a second call. And in one of those second calls, you'll sort of be able to read the room and decide that they need this thing that you're talking about conceptually. And then the Merrick First, Obi-Wan Kenobi move was, well, let me get this straight. So you have two loose pieces of paper, and it sounds like if you had something that took a little metal thing and punctured the paper and held them together, sounds like that would be meaningful. And so you get the customer to say back that the stapler idea that you have is meaningful. And once they do that, you say, hey, do you have any budget for that? And that's a magic moment. And 3 out of the 4 second calls will say, nah, my boss is a jerk, or no, times are tough, or whatever the excuse they make up. And one of them say, yep. And then you have a startup. And that's such a powerful moment.
Very, very cool. So, we're gonna jump, a little bit into how that starts to scale up from getting those early customers and product market fit and stuff. But just for context of the audience, and I probably should have started with this a little bit. Maybe give the 30-second elevator pitch on what Florence Healthcare does, just for everybody before we keep going with the story.
Sure. So, we are a collaboration platform for clinical drug research. All the innovations from the COVID-19 vaccines to new therapies for cancer require collaboration between 2 groups. One is the pharma company that comes up with the new therapy, and the other are hospitals, or what's called clinical trial sites, that meet with the patients and hand out the experimental medication. Turns out there's a capacity problem there, and that all the best ideas that science has for new medicines, there's only about 60% of the capacity required to get them to market, to prove them safe and effective in clinical trials and get them approved by the FDA. And that's the problem that we work on. We make software that automates a lot of the content creation, a lot of the data collection, and a lot of collaboration between the pharma companies and the doctors that are seeing the patients, in order to close that 40% shortfall in capacity. And by doing so, we can get medicines to market sooner, that are proven safer, that create better outcomes for your family and mine. So we get to work on a really meaningful problem. But at the end of the day, it's a document management tool that helps parties that work on drugs all over the world work together more efficiently.
Awesome. And so as you say that, and now you're going back to where we were in the story, was that always the vision, or how did that vision evolve from coming out of hackathon to where you're at today?
It wasn't. We knew we wanted to help research. We first thought it was going to be wearable devices, just because we were interested in the technology. And there was a time when we were doing discovery calls, both for the wearable devices as well as for this collaboration platform idea. And I don't know if 2 of us had a bias towards one, but we had to have we knew we couldn't pursue both forever. And so that was one of the more difficult moments in founding the business. We were probably 6 months in. We'd probably done 150 discovery calls, something like that. And we knew we had to pick. And we went through the notes and did sort of a sentiment analysis of the notes, and we looked at the types of responses we were getting for the wearable device idea versus the types of responses we were getting on the collaboration platform idea, and they were more positive for the collaboration platform idea, and we went for it.
Interesting you say that, because I think that's one of the things we see a lot in early startups is, to your point, there's a lot of pivot in the original idea to where it ultimately, finds success. But then I think I see that's a common spot, right? You got path A or path B. And I think a lot of defaults mistakenly start to, well, we're just going to do both. And you guys kind of made a decision, hey, we looked at it and we're going down path B. Talk about that decision of like why you felt convicted to go down a path versus just trying to do everything and see what sticks.
I have a slide about that.
Great.
Put up here. So unless you win a lottery, you have a finite amount of resources to prove out your idea. And so, what I found is the goal of the first 2 years of the business is to, in the most efficient way, get to the truth about your idea. And you can either do that by being really smart, which is the y-axis of this chart, or you can do that with a massive amount of customer exposure just on that idea. And so it creates this sort of this area under the curve. You can get that area this way if you're like Steve Jobs, like the world is going to have the iPhone. Well, I'm not as smart as Steve Jobs, so I had to do it this way, right? Where lots of customer exposure around one idea in order to get to the truth about whether that idea is worthwhile. Of course, if you pursue two ideas, you cut this surface, you cut that area under the curve in half, and you cut your chances of being successful in half. And it's actually worse than that because there's switching costs between the idea too. You sort of got to reframe your mind when you talk about one thing versus another. You never get as good as talking about both ideas. It's really worse in every way. And the trouble is you get to product market fit at some point, hopefully before that red line hits, where it's either the number of customers you talk to or the amount of time elapses. And so if you split your idea in two, you're not going to get to certainty about product market fit before you run out of cash, or you run out of time, or you run out of patience with each other as founders. So what I found is the formula to success is up there. It's basically the area of a triangle, which is half of being not that smart times the number of customer interactions over time that you have. For us, it took us 248 calls to have conviction and go raise a round in that idea. And if you had two, it wouldn't be, what's 248 times 2? It's 496. It wouldn't be 496 calls. It'd be something like 3 times that, because two ideas, just you have switching costs. It's not an effective way to do it. So you got to pick.
Love that. Love that. So let's talk about that, Ryan, for a second on two dimensions. One is just the conviction, and then let's talk fundraising. That's another question startups have, how to think through that. So on the conviction side, hey, as you get to that 248, what was it that started to get you the conviction that, yeah, we do have some product market fit here and we do got something really special?
Well, that first moment that I mentioned earlier around you having the customer say back your value proposition in their words, and then them in the next breath confirming that they have budget to allocate to it. That's sort of 50% of the way there. That's a big moment. And then it starts to get, from my perspective, pretty much sales 101. Are you starting to build a pipeline of customers that say they have budget to work on this problem? And are you starting to get a conversion rate of that pipeline that is a reasonable SaaS conversion rate? Are you converting 1 out of 3 qualified opportunities into customers? And that takes a while, right? It may not be happening at a high velocity, but that conversion ratio, even if you're only converting 2 customers a year, the conversion ratio has to be a reasonable 1 out of 3, something like that. So we went very quickly from one passionate customer buying into the concept to running our sales pipeline like any other software business, and checking to see if those metrics conversion rate, sales cycle time, average deal size, whether those were reasonable metrics, and that's when we knew it could scale.
Awesome. So maybe let's go to the second part of what you had just said around the fundraising side. Again, a common question we see from startups is, when should I raise? How much should I raise? Who should I raise from? And I know you guys have done a couple rounds over time. Maybe just talk to like how you first thought about it, and then as you continued to fundraise, how you thought about the process. Any lessons learned there?
Yeah, and I guess for context, I didn't share. We've raised $115 million so far. We're a $30 million run rate business. Have 250 employees, something like that. And a lot of those early fundraising questions are very personal. What's your relationship with your partner and both your spouse as well as your co-founder? How long can you go? How much pain can you tolerate not taking a salary? Or how many people do you have to hire that either are willing to not take a salary or not? And it's different for every startup. We were only willing to work. We worked for about 6 months with no salary, and we worked for another year, paying ourselves $35,000 a year, which for some reason is a magic number. Maybe folks in the call know, I don't know. It had something to do with our health insurance. We couldn't pay ourselves less than that. So that's what we did. And then we raised a seed round of about $1.5 million, something like that. And then it got hard. So after we raised our seed, it got hard because I think almost 10 years ago, the angel investing community in Atlanta was much smaller. Healthcare was a less known, a less interesting thing to investors in Atlanta. And Silicon Valley and New York investors were still a little bit more skeptical of Atlanta companies. So keeping the company going until we did our first institutional round was really a challenge. And that took about 4 years. So we had, 2.5 years after we raised our first C round of like bumping along and running. My co-founders and I wrote personal checks in to make payroll a couple of times. It was tight. And then it wasn't. And in fact, there's a slide on that, which might be useful. Hold on, let me fix something here. This, gotta do this. Hit the magic button, it's all gonna work, right?
And for folks, we're going to probably wrap up here with Ryan's got to run here probably 5 minutes. If you have questions and want to put them in the chat, we'll try and get to a couple of those here in a minute. So
this is what our valuation looked like for the first 60 months, for the first 5 years of the business. And that's what it looked like for the first, 7 years of the business. So I think a bit of advice is that, especially if you're an unusual category, and as healthcare entrepreneurs, I think you still are in an unusual category here in Atlanta. You may have a valuation curve that looks a lot like this.
Awesome. I love that. I think it's so true that, hey, it takes a long time and foundation, but if you build that right foundation, you get a lot of that exponential scaling at the end there. Couple questions are coming in, but one last one here, and then I'll pull out a few of those, Ryan, and thanks for your time. Any other big lessons learned? We've touched on a lot of different things from starting the business and product market fit and fundraising. Any other lessons learned you want to leave with the audience here today?
I think the last is, we talked about product market fit and how to have those first few meetings and then switch immediately to running your sales pipeline like a mature business. The other thing you want to switch immediately to running like a mature business in order to be cash efficient is to run off your P&L and not off your balance sheet. That means every 2 weeks, I would sit down with an Excel sheet that had the cash I had in the bank, had the receivables I was expecting, had the new deals I was expecting to book, and when we get those receivables, and then all the expenses, not the expense categories, but every invoice I had to pay, because we were running so thin, and sometimes that we ran down to zero. But what that allows you to do is not build a burn rate based on what your funding was, but based on both your funding and how much you're bringing in with sales, and you can extend your runway a lot longer that way. So always spend a lot of time focusing on your budget relative to both the funding you raising you do, as well as to your customer pipeline and the cash getting paid by customers.
Awesome. Love that. Ryan, real quick, I want to give you a plug too. I know we were talking earlier in the call that you got some open positions you guys are looking for. You want to mention that for a minute to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky to be in a position of where we're scaling. And so we're hiring in the product management side of our business, and we're hiring in the sales side of our business. We'll get pretty close to 40 million in run rate by the end of this year, and have 100 million in our sights in the next 24 months. And we get to make an impact on humankind on the process. So we'd love if folks in your network or you have an interest in joining us, shoot me. I'll put my email in the chat. And if I can be helpful in questions with your startup, if there might be something that we've seen in growing Florence, I'd be delighted to connect with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. I'll do one question. I know you got to run here. From Christian, how did you decide what metrics and data to focus on in the beginning? What were they, knowing there's lots of different things you could have focused on?
Yeah, you have to decide whether you are an enterprise business where you're going to do at least $20,000 transactions and up, or you're an SMB business where people are going to pay with a credit card. And so very different sets of metrics between those two businesses. In an enterprise business, it's all about the sales cycle, right? And the pipeline you build, how much leads cost, how long it takes to qualify those prospects and convert them in those opportunities into closed deals. It was all sales funnel metrics that we cared about. And then if you are a credit card sort of oriented business with a higher volume of lower transactions, I know less about that, but that's really sort of web marketing 101 stuff. What's the funnel look like in terms of visitors to your site? How do you come to convert automatically? What features can you build into the product to change conversion behaviors among your customers? We had none of that. We didn't do a lot of A/B testing in the product. It was all about what the decision makers told us and how that affected our sales cycle time. So just figure out whether you're a transactional business with a credit card or whether you're an enterprise sales business, and those are the two buckets of metrics you should work on.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, I know we're coming up on time for you here. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. Lots of great lessons learned on finding the right co-founders and the passion for the idea and product market fit and all that. So we really appreciate you taking the time today to join us.
What an awesome community, AT, that you and JC have built here. I wish it was here when we started Florence back in 2014.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. You have a great day and appreciate you taking the time. For the rest of you, feel free to stay on for a minute if you want. We'll do a little bit of some needs and leads here.